The Philadelphia Eagles may have a depth problem at wide receiver behind A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. It's one of the three main questions I have at receiver heading into training camp next week.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the show. We are brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are back to daily episodes Monday through Friday. This week we are previewing Philadelphia Eagles training camp for the 2025 season. That gets underway in, yes, just 1 week. A week from today, Philadelphia Eagles football is back at the Nova Care Complex. Yesterday, we talked about the quarterback and running back position. Today, I have three questions for the wide receiver and tight end positions heading into camp next Tuesday. And I want to start with receiver because receiver is in an interesting spot. Like at the top, the Philadelphia Eagles and their franchise's history, the long tenured history of this football team, they've never been in a better spot up top. They have the best wide receiver duo they've ever had in franchise history. A.J. Brown is a top 3 receiver in the NFL. I truly believe that DeVonta Smith is a top 10 receiver in the NFL. I don't think you can argue that he's at least top 15. That is better than the situation you had with Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin, with Harold Carmichael and Mike Quick, when you had Terrell Owens or even Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar. Like at the top, you are set. And to have your third receiver be a former first-round pick, a top 20 selection, in Jahan Dotson, you could do a lot worse. There's a lot of teams that have a worse wide receiver 3 than Dotson. Most teams have a depth problem behind their top 3 or 4 players. Most teams don't have studs 5 deep at every single spot on their roster. Even the Philadelphia Eagles, who seem like they have a super team on paper, I think the most complete team in the NFL right now on paper, even they could be 3 to 4 deep on a roster, but most aren't 5 to 6 plus deep with legitimate starting talent. Normally you have 2 to 3 guys that are that caliber of football players. So I think the Eagles are in a good spot, but I will say I don't love the depth. Even though I'm not expecting it to be stud starters behind your top 3, if there's an injury to A.J. Brown or DeVonta Smith this year, I do wonder if these younger guys can step up. Because last year when they had injuries to Brown and Smith early in the year, I wasn't very impressed with Dotson. Although he was new to the offense, I wasn't very impressed with Johnny Wilson or Anais Smith. So it's a position that I'm going to be watching closely in camp this year because I think there's a lot of young, interesting players battling for, roster spots. But I do wonder, even if they make the team, what could their impact be in 2025? At the top, again, very little questions. I would say the main question I have surrounding A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith, because you know what you're getting in these guys every single year. They've proven that the last 3 seasons, that they're 2 of your 10 best players on the roster. My big question for those 2 heading into this repeat attempt season is, will they stay happy? Does winning remain the focus? For A.J. Brown, for DeVonta Smith, heck, for this entire roster. And I truly believe that A.J. Brown cares more about winning championships. Despite all his comments this offseason about his motivations for his career now, I do believe winning titles and being a team-first guy is the primary focus of A.J. Brown moving forward. I truly believe DeVonta Smith is willing to do whatever it takes to win more titles. I think that Alabama DNA has, that ability to play with so many different stars and share the rock. Like he played with Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs and Jalen Waddle at Alabama and Josh Jacobs, and now he's playing with Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. I truly believe that these guys see the potential of this football team to become the next dynasty in the NFL, and I hate using that word after just 1 ring, but I think they see that potential, and I hope that they continue to do whatever it takes to win. But things do change after you win championships. I do wonder if the Eagles this year are very run-heavy again, if they're maybe they're not 32nd in the league in passing attempts like they were last year in the regular season, but let's say they're kind of around where the Buffalo Bills were last year. They're 28th or 29th or bottom half of the league. I do still wonder if DeVonta Smith's going to be okay being an 850 receiving yard to an 1,100 yard kind of guy like he's been throughout his career in Philadelphia. I do wonder, and I'm not predicting that they're going to be unhappy and demand trades, but at the top of my head, one question is, A.J. Brown's cup going to be full enough this year if he's around 1,000 yards again? If he has a couple big games, but the majority of the time he's seeing like 5 to 7 targets a football game, is that going to be enough for these guys, even if winning continues to happen, even if they're competing at a high level for championships year after year? And it's not something specifically about Brown or Smith. I think they have the right makeup to be that kind of selfless player, to be in Philadelphia long term, to win hopefully multiple Super Bowls with this current core. But I've seen in sports teams that become kind of a dynasty or consistently win year after year after year, and it almost becomes the normal. Sometimes priorities do change. Sometimes players, and I don't fault them, sometimes they want new challenges and they're looking for new accolades and new career accomplishments to strive for. And I think that's, again, if I had to have a question at the top for DeVonta and AJ, it's will they stay happy if the Eagles say, we're not going to really budge from what we did best last year. We're going to run the football yet again in 2025 more than anybody in football. I believe there will be a return to the means. I think there will be a middle ground from that approach. I think they'll throw a lot more this year. I think those guys will also post better numbers because they're going to be healthy, hopefully. They both missed a couple games last year, so their numbers were also just lower than they were in 2022 and 2023. But that's a big question for me is, what's their mindset if the Eagles' offense does not change? I'm not predicting they're going to want out, but you know how wide receivers are. They want the ball. It's very hard to stay engaged in the game consistently if you're not getting the football. So that's something interesting to me to watch out for. And then at the top 3 of this position group, Jahan Dotson's big question is, what's his role going to be in 2025? Will he yet again, if the Eagles do throw very little compared to other NFL teams, even if his chemistry with Jalen Hurts grows, and I think you saw as the year progressed, Jalen did start to grow more confident in throwing to Dotson, especially in the playoffs with those couple big receptions in the Super Bowl and the touchdown to Green Bay. It was only 3 catches, but you could kind of see like Jalen was starting to look his way a little bit more. But if they still are running him more than anybody, is there really much of a difference in Dotson's production this year compared to 2024? Maybe if they do throw more this year to keep Saquon healthy, and maybe Dallas Goedert still deals with injuries, or so do Brown and Smith, and Jalen does look for Dotson more this year, and they add more of an emphasis on that. They make more of a conceded effort to do that. Maybe he does post better numbers. Like, I'm excited about Dotson. You guys know I've talked about it on the show a lot this offseason. He's in a career year, which is good for him. Normally, career year players in Philadelphia play really well to get paid the next year in free agency. He could, if he has a strong season this year, just makes the most of his limited opportunities, I think he could get a bigger opportunity with another team next year that's willing to pay more for a young player that was a former first-round pick that impressed when he got the football in Philadelphia for 2 years. It's a big year for him. And, again, I don't think there's going to be games where he's getting, 7 to 10 targets in a football game, but I do think he'll get more than he did last year. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he doubles the reception and yardage total that he had last year, where he's closer to maybe he's like a 25 to 35 catch guy this year, is closer to 400 to 500 yards receiving than the little over 200 he had last year. I'd say he's in that 400-yard receiving range and maybe like 25 to 30 catches, and I think that's a bigger role than he had last year. So I'm interested to see like what they have for Dotson in year 2 with Jalen Hurts, year 2 of this system. He's in a career year. He's still young and growing. I'm very intrigued by Dotson in 2025. But the big question is what I was talking about earlier. Is there a depth problem with the Eagles at wide receiver? Like, do they need to go out there and sign an Amari Cooper type of veteran or a Tyler Boyd? Because after Brown, Smith, and Dotson, if there's an injury or two, like, do we trust Johnny Wilson to take on more in year 2, or Terrace Marshall Jr., even though Jalen Hurts mentioned him by name as somebody that impressed in the spring? Is he somebody that can really play for a Super Bowl contender? Is Anais Smith going to be anything in year 2, or Danny Gray? I think the Eagles want some of these young guys, especially their draft picks, Wilson and Smith specifically, to go out there and earn these spots and show them that they don't have a depth problem. But if you told me the Eagles added another veteran receiver almost to rotate in with Dotson, like Olamide Zaccheaus to their Quez Watkins, or just another depth piece, that's proven. I wouldn't be shocked because wide receiver right now, below the top 3, it's a huge projection. I'm a big fan of Johnny Wilson and Danny Gray. I'm intrigued by Terrace Marshall Jr., and hopefully Ainias Smith can be more than he was last year, but it's a really young, unproven group, so we'll see what happens in camp. Going to be watching that closely for sure as well. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, 3 big questions at the tight end position. Is Dallas Goedert finally going to stay healthy this year and ball out and put up career numbers in a contract season? We'll get into it coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Look, we've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. It happened to me a couple years ago. Wanted to see one of my favorite country artists in Nashville. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Plus, if you want to make sure you're getting a great view on top of the great prices, Gametime gives you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying concert, show tickets, Philadelphia Eagles football games, all that and more with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use our code in all capital letters, Locked On NFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Again, create that account, redeem the code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We are continuing our training camp preview series today, talking about the pass catchers, wide receiver, and tight end. It's all about, yet again, year 4 of it being featured heavily with A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert leading the way. But I do think there's a bigger role this year for Jahan Dotson. I'm very intrigued with, all right, Terrace Marshall, Johnny Wilson, Ainias Smith, Danny Gray, 4 young receivers. Like, go out there and earn a spot. Prove that we don't need to go sign a Amari Cooper or a Tyler Boyd or even a lower-tier veteran receiver that has some production. Because below Smith and Brown and Dotson, there is no production at wide receiver for the Eagles. It's very unproven. It's very young. That's the theme of the majority of the Eagles' depth spots on this roster. But receiver especially, like, who knows what you're getting in all those guys. It's kind of just throw a bunch of darts at the wall and, see what sticks. So that's going to be interesting. And it's kind of similar at tight end. But at the top, when Dallas Goedert's healthy, you have a top 5, top 10 tight end in football. But Dallas Goedert doesn't always stay healthy. So behind him, what do you have in Grant Calcaterra, Harrison Bryant, and Kylan Granson, 2 newly signed free agents? E.J. Jenkins was on the roster a lot last year as that third tight end. Can he battle for a spot? To me, though, the big question at the top for Dallas Goedert is a career year coming for Dallas in a contract year. That tends to be the theme, especially recently. Like Josh Sweat's the first name that comes to mind last year. A lot of times when these, really good Eagles players that are in their prime get into a contract season, they ball out. That was Milton Williams last year. That was Josh Sweat. Heck, just look at the Eagles' defensive line. Like, those guys absolutely hooped, and they ended up earning massive extensions, new deals in Arizona and New England. Could Dallas Goedert be that next guy that earns a mega payday after a career year this season? Even if it's not in Philadelphia, I can still see a team, like if he plays, and not even if he plays all 17 games. If he does that, he's going to get paid, because then we know he's putting up 700-plus receiving yards. He's going to be at the top of the league in touchdowns for tight ends and yards per reception. Like, I think he'll get paid in that way. But even if he plays 15 games, like if he misses just a couple, but he avoids that 3 to 5 to 6 games it feels like he misses every single year, I think that will make teams, maybe even the Eagles, feel comfortable enough to pay him, because the pros with Dallas still outweigh the cons because he is so dynamic, so versatile as a tight end. He is so good and clutch in late game situations in the playoffs that I think if he goes out there and just really focuses on staying healthy, it's not over. Even though he had to take a pay cut this year to stay in Philadelphia on a 1-year deal despite the playoff run he had last year, his hopes, his dreams of getting a Trey McBride kind of extension or what, George Kittle got in San Francisco this year, it's not dead. It's definitely not dead. Right now, the league didn't want to give him that because, again, you just can't rely on. He's going to play 11 to 14 games a year. Like, that's what you've been able to bank on throughout Dallas Goedert's career. He needs to stay healthy. If he does, I think a career year is coming. I think we could see something like 2021. That was the last time that he really stayed healthy and he really balled out. He led the league that year, I believe, in yards per reception for tight ends. He had over 800 receiving yards. And now the numbers might be a little bit lower because, again, you've got Brown, Smith, and Saquon in this offense. But I do wonder if Goedert's going to be the next in line, like Josh Sweat and Milton Williams last year, that just completely balls out and earns a payday next year, whether it's in Philadelphia or somewhere else around the NFL. I think it's going to happen. I really do. And then my big question for tight end 2, Grant Calcaterra. What's this guy's ceiling? Grant Calcaterra last year was somebody that I thought took a lot of strides, underratedly so. Like, he became a pretty reliable pass catcher. Like, there were some games, I remember the game I was at specifically after the bye week, the Cleveland Browns game. He had a bunch of explosive plays over the middle of the field. Like, he did actually have the trust of Jalen Hurts, I think actually more than Jahan Dotson did for a lot of last season. So I think he's a pretty good natural pass catcher that was only in year 2. Like, he's a young player still developing. My question is he going to kind of plateau as last year's Grant Calcaterra? Like, is that all we're getting? It's not a bad kind of player to get for a day 3 draft pick a couple years ago out of SMU, but is there more? Like, I'm not saying he's going to be the future replacement to Dallas Goedert if Goedert balls out this year, like I'm projecting him to do, and if he leaves elsewhere. I'm not saying Calcaterra is the next tight end waiting in the wings, but I do wonder, like, is his ceiling going to be a little bit higher than last year where the Eagles can really start to utilize a 12 personnel package more? They're always going to be a team that plays out of 11 more than any other package. But, hey, like, the Eagles haven't really had a dangerous 12 personnel package in the passing game since 2019 with a healthy Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. Since the Goedert-Ertz era, they haven't really been able to have that over the last 3 seasons, and that can really help in the run game. I think having Calcaterra take another step would be huge for the Eagles this year. I'm not even talking, again, I'm not expecting him to replace Dallas Goedert, but can he be like a solid tight end 2 that isn't just out there when Dallas Goedert's injured? Like, can there be times they say, hey, we actually want Calcaterra out there over Dotson? Like, let's get him out on the football field. He took some big strides last year. Still not enough for me to be convinced that he should play more than Dotson, that they should utilize 12 personnel more. But maybe this year, like, he really starts to shine in camp in the preseason, and we see, okay, there's another leap coming for a younger tight end. Calcaterra is very intriguing to me. And then the other big question at tight end, who's tight end 3? There's a 3-way battle. It's going to be between 2 new signed free agents, Harrison Bryant from the Las Vegas Raiders, Kylan Granson, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts, and then E.J. Jenkins, who the Eagles had on their practice squad for a while, was up on the 53-man roster a lot last year. Like, those are the 3 guys that are battling for that 3rd spot. Right now, if I had to bet, I think Harrison Bryant is the favorite to be that 3rd guy. I think the Eagles only keep 3 tight ends on the 53-man roster. I think they'll carry a 4th one on the practice squad. I project that's likely to be E.J. Jenkins. I think Harrison Bryant and Kylan Granson battle for that 3rd spot. Granson is interesting. Like, I think he's pretty explosive. I think he's the fastest, most athletic, twitchiest receiver of these 3 tight ends. But Harrison Bryant, I think, is the most well put together, complete player at the position. Like, I think he's the best blocker, the best, like, combining blocking, receiving, his size and his height, power, some speed as well, some natural pass catching ability. I think he is the favorite to be the 3rd tight end. whereas I think Granson is maybe that fourth guy, and then EJ Jenkins I think is on the outside looking in. But I do think a team might want to pick up Bryant or Granson if they end up on waivers or in free agency in the summer. So I think Jenkins is the favorite to be that fourth guy they carry on the practice squad. Also, too, because he knows the system. He was with the Eagles all of last year. Like, he did play in certain packages, especially at the end of the year when Goedert was kind of banged up. So that's the third big question, is who wins that battle? Right now, I think Harrison Bryant's the favorite, but I think Granson's an interesting player to keep an eye on, too. A free agent signing that kind of people completely forgot about this year, but the Eagles did bring in some tight ends to compete and maybe push Calcaterra. Like, maybe one of those guys impresses and pushes Calcaterra for the tight end 2 spot. I think it's unlikely, but they are intriguing to me for sure. All right, guys, we will wrap up this edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, yesterday I talked about Jalen Hurts becoming this surgical, accurate pocket passer this year, building off of what he did in the Super Bowl and the NFC Championship last year. There is something that I think he learned and mastered last year that's really going to help him take that next step as a pocket passer in 2025. I'll tell you what that was coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, guys, we are wrapping up this Wednesday, or I should say Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Excited for Wednesday because, guys, tomorrow the Locked On NFL Top 100 is here. That's right. Voted on by NFL hosts, including myself, of the Locked On Podcast Network. Our Top 100 was formed by experts that cover these teams and players every single day. Find the full list on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and then don't miss our reaction show right here on Locked On Eagles tomorrow to see where all the Eagles players landed on the list. And spoiler alert, there's a good amount of them, as there should be for the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts is somebody that, spoiler alert, I think I haven't seen yet where he ranks on this list. We'll react tomorrow on the show, but I think he'll end up, based on all these other ridiculous lists that have him too low, I think he'll end up probably being too low. If Jalen wants to fully earn the respect of, and I don't think he cares, and again, just because people don't believe Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback or even top 7, I saw that executive list of anonymous NFL executives putting him 9th, which is absolutely ridiculous. Even if we don't care about that and it doesn't prove anything about him, the proof's in the pudding that he is a top 5 quarterback from an accomplishments perspective. Your opinion doesn't matter. You could have your opinion, but facts are facts. Even so, if there's ever a time that Jalen could convince people that he is a top 5 quarterback, and there is no doubt, I think there already should be no doubt, but what does he have to do? Like, we talked about this on our Locked On Eagles squad show today. What can he do? I think it's going to be very hard unless he has a team that's just terrible and he carries them to the playoffs again. He'll be always punished for his support system, which is hypocritical because Mahomes has had a great support system in Kansas City. Lamar's had one in Baltimore. Josh Allen's had one in Buffalo. And Jalen's done more with a great support system than those guys, and yet he's punished more than they are for having that kind of really good roster. I digress. If he is going to ever be seen in the same light, in the same breath as those guys, people want a certain style of quarterback. They want to see him pick defenses apart from inside the pocket. And again, Jalen is elite in different ways. He's an elite player in a different way than those guys. I don't know if he'll ever be a Joe Burrow caliber of consistent pocket passer, but if he does that, I think that is what could truly convince people. If he's just picking defenses apart this year and he's putting up 3,700 plus passing yards, if he's sniffing 4,000 passing yards and the Eagles are winning because of the passing game, I think that could convince them. Although he did that in 2022 as an MVP runner-up, and it still didn't convince them. But anyway, I think that could be the way to convince some people. How does he do that? Well, I think he's already showed signs that he's about to take that step again. I think we saw that in the NFC Championship. We saw it in the Super Bowl. It sounded like he was that guy in OTAs and early mini camps. I think just becoming that pocket passer where he knows where the ball's going. It's perfectly in the receiver's hands. Like, the ball's never touching the ground. He's always staying ahead of the sticks. He's not turning the ball over as much. That's that final evolution of Jalen Hurts' game. And I think he actually learned something last year. He mastered something that can really help him become that more surgical anticipation player, pre-snap master in the pocket in 2025. He learned last year how to be a game manager. And people use that term in a negative way to discredit Jalen Hurts and other players. Because game manager, a lot of people define that as a player that he can't be aggressive. He can't elevate a team. Like, he is carried by the sum of the parts, by the supporting cast. But I think Jalen Hurts last year became a game manager in its purest definition. He became a game manager in a good way. He learned when to pick and choose his spots. He learned that he has a great roster and that every year his team requires a different version of him. Every game, every play, every down requires, every situation requires a different version of him. That's truly what a game manager is, where he's not putting his offense and his defense in harm's way. He's not putting them behind the sticks or in a bad position where the other team has great, field position because he threw another bad pick. He was too aggressive. Like, yes, you don't want a gun-shy Sam Bradford level game manager. That's what you think of when you hear game manager. It's Sam Bradford, it's Alex Smith. But I think guys like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, the best of the best, those guys all knew how to manage games. They knew when to be the hero, when to be the alpha, and when to just check it down, when to stay ahead of the sticks, when to just make the smart play. There's a really hard balancing act that quarterbacks have to find with that to perfect the craft of this position, to become elite players, and it's why a lot of guys just don't do it. You have the Jameis Winstons and the Carson Wentz and the Will Levis group of the world that go far too into the hero ball style, and they never can quit that never say die mentality. And then over here, you've got the Sam Bradfords of the world that just always checked it down. They just were always gun shy because they were too afraid to make a mistake. They were seeing ghosts. Jalen Hurts last year, I think, perfected the mentality of when to just get rid of the ball quick, get it in the hands of his receivers, let them do the work, and when he needed to be the hero, when he needed to elevate to make plays. He learned how to play within structure, and he knew when to play outside of structure. He knew, hey, this game, it's all about Saquon. I got to take a back seat. Hey, this game, i.e. the Bengals game, the Steelers game, the NFC title, or the Super Bowl especially, hey, I got to be the guy. I got this. I'm going to take over here. I think that's a really impressive thing an athlete can have. And he's almost knocked for what his role was last year in the offense, but I think that was a sign of things to come, that if that efficiency can be maintained with an increase in volume in passing this year, that's when he becomes that. I think he's already a top 5 guy. I don't need to be convinced of that, but that's when I think there can be no more doubts about who Jalen Hurts is. Like, that's that final level. And I think last year he was getting to be that player. I think he was growing, and that's huge because in 2023 he was starting to develop some hero ball tactics. He had double-digit interceptions. He was starting to turn the ball over more, fumbling as well, and being overly aggressive. And this year, in the first 4 weeks of the year, that was happening again. Like, go back and watch the tape against Green Bay. Go back and watch the tape against even that Tampa game. I think that bye week, reining it in, was huge for him. And now I don't think they need to have the training wheels on for him to stay that kind of player, that smart, efficient, yet aggressive football player. I think now you can be comfortable saying, in this game, we can give him 30 passing attempts, and he's not going to turn back into a Jameis Winston, Carson Wentz level of guy. And that's really important, especially when you have a team this talented. It shows the self-awareness, the selflessness of Jalen Hurts last year, who he became, to know that, hey, this team doesn't need that guy right now. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And I know when he can fit. He's not a square peg in a round hole. If it's a round hole, he can be a round hole. If it's a square hole, he can be a square peg. Athletes, not all athletes know how to do that. There's a lot of one-trick ponies that, even in basketball, I made the reference today on the squad show, like the Russell Westbrooks of the world and, the Ja Morants. Like, I don't think those guys will ever consistently win championships because they know one speed, one style. They can't fit into any kind of system. The LeBron James of the world, the Kevin Durant's, the Steph Curry's that make it work with any kind of star that comes in. Those are the players that thrive. The Tom Brady's that, hey, if I need to be the guy that throws 40-plus times with Randy Moss, I can put up 50 passing touchdowns in a year and win MVP. Hey, if I don't have that guy and it's all about defense and running the football, I can be the game manager I was in the early 2000s, or the guy when I was throwing the ball to, Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, and Rob Gronkowski. Tom Brady, every year, there's a different version of Tom Brady. That, to me, is a special player. Josh Allen this year, give him a lot of credit. He did very similar things to Jalen Hurts. The Bills were 29th this year in passing attempts. He realized this year's version of the Bills, it called for him to be a little more conservative, called for them to run the football more, to not be behind the sticks because they didn't have the personnel for that. And the Bills made the AFC Championship. They needed a different version of Josh Allen. That, to me, shows maturity and growth, evolving in a player, not regression in a player. And that's why it kind of drives me nuts a little bit that people talk about Jalen and what he did in 2024 in that light, because I think 2022 and 2023 showed that without Saquon Barkley, the Eagles can still be a team when they're passing the ball 30-plus times a game. Jalen Hurts can be the guy that's carrying the offense, and you can still compete for championships. So why they discredit him in 2024, especially then when he did it again in the Super Bowl, he had to be the alpha, and he was. Why is he ninth in these lists? Why is he going to be low probably tomorrow on our Locked On NFL Top 100? It's going to drive me nuts. I'll defend him again, but I think last year was a sign of things to come, and I'm very curious now, like, all right, yeah, they're still going to run more than anybody probably, but hey, those games where Jalen's throwing 25 to 30-plus times a game, did last year show he's going to be just efficient week in, week out? Very intrigued by that. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We've still got a Wednesday show reacting to the NFL Top 100 on the Locked On Podcast Network. We've got a Thursday and Friday episode for you as well, and a live squad show Thursday afternoon at 12 p.m. on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Until then, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.